With the area around the settlement finally free of the mechanoid menace, the squad took the opportunity to finally drag in a lot of the materials that had been left outside, including mechanoid corpses, the mortars from the abandoned siege, and a metric ton of steel slag chunks that they could melt down to produce more steel. Although things seemed to be going well, the original members of the squad had been in this fight a long time, and many had sustained a lot of injuries and personal losses. It was hitting everyone hard, but Tavi was the worst off. His multitude of permanent injuries caused him constant pain, which soon drove him to enter a murderous rage. Although the commander pitied Tavi and the poor state he was in, the only way he could protect the others was to arrest Tavi and lock him away, until he'd calmed down. After that, they could release him and let him reintegrate with the rest of the squad. Sadly, his release may have been premature, as, in another fit of rage, he set his sights on destroying the ground-penetrating scanner, which the squad relied on for resources. He managed to get a few good kicks in before Gardner swooped in once more and dragged him kicking and screaming back to their makeshift prison. Tavi's poor mental health did spur the commander into action, however. He decided he'd need to take a more proactive approach to trying to keep everyone happy and keep morale high. To that end, he insisted that the squad discard any damaged apparel, and asked Tercio to ensure that they always had at least one new t-shirt, parka, and pair of trousers in supply, for anyone who may need them. New clothes weren't exactly the solution to all of their problems, but it would be an important first step, a foundation upon which to build their happiness. Another step towards this would be to make the settlement a prettier and more productive place. One easy step to achieving this would be paving some of the paths between the buildings. Until this point, the squad had just been traipsing through the mud and grass, but laying down some marble brick paths would make it a much more pleasant experience. In an extra effort to improve the defences and hopefully minimise the likelihood of the squad receiving more injuries, something that he was all too familiar with, Tavi suggested reinstating the spotlights at the front of the base. The spotlights could be turned upon attacking forces, blinding them and making it a lot harder for them to aim their shots at the defending squad members. In amongst all the chaos, Braum and Gardner's love was still going strong. They still made sure to find time to go on small dates, walking through nature and just chatting away to each other. These moments of simple, carefree joy are what the commander was hoping to provide for the entire system once the Empire was gone. To keep the mission to protect the squad going, Jay began researching marine armour, a remarkably strong suit of armour which could help greatly if they can figure out how to produce their own. Yet another raid approached the base, with a small group of swords rushing the defences. Before the squad knew what was happening, one of the attackers had whipped out a grenade launcher, which could have spelt disaster for the defenders. However, it seemed the new spotlights were doing their job well, as the lights blinded the sword, making his shot go wide. It took out a chunk of the hospital wall, but didn't cause any injuries. The squad repaid his attempts by ensuring that he sustained many injuries. It seemed that Vin had fully embraced the Rebels' mission to build a better world, and with her passions for medical work and socialising, she suggested that the squad rescue one of the injured swords and convince them to join the squad. Inspired by her passion, the commander agrees, but only on the condition that both tending to the captive's wounds and converting them to the cause are responsibilities that lie solely with Vin. Vin eagerly agrees, but after tending to the prisoner in their dusty makeshift cell next to the settlement's batteries, she puts an idea to the group. Given that they'll often want to convince attackers to join the rebellion to grow their numbers, and the fact that, as Tavi's shown, they may occasionally need to restrain some of their own number to protect the others, she suggests that they invest in a slightly nicer prison block, featuring some comforts for the prisoners. She suggests it will be easier to win over dissenting people if they're willing to show that they're compassionate and capable of providing for people. Braum agrees to work with her to find a space in the settlement to lay out a few prison rooms, and, once they're finished, the group move their new prisoner into her accommodations. With Jay making regular returns to the settlement in his shuttle, the squad decided it would make sense to create a small landing zone for him, where they could ensure no trees or thickets got in the way of his landing. They packed down the dirt just outside the stockpile, to make it quick and easy for him to load the materials he'd need from the shelves into the shuttle. Realising what a sensible idea packing down the area for the shuttle landing spot was, Kelsier suggests that they do the same for the area in front of the defences, ensuring that they don't need to regularly spend time trimming back the trees that grow there. It would seem that there is no shortage of asteroids above this planet, as the Arctis Minor drifts into yet another field, once more granting Jay a very rude awakening as he rushes to the control console to perform a short burn to escape the field. Despite the minor damage from the asteroids, work on the second nacelle is coming along nicely, and Jay's even started extending the hull to the rear of the ship, with the intention of using the small compartment to house the ship's shield generator. Back on the ground, the commander has finally finished gestating his pikeman mechanoid. The pikeman's a large mechanoid with a long-range needle gun, which can hit with accuracy across large distances. It will complement the very short range of the Militars nicely. With the success of their first large mechanoid, he endeavours to create another, this time a tunneler, a large mech that's capable of mining and drilling for them, something that the squad are doing a lot of. However, the commander's primary interest in it is as a combat mechanoid. The tunneler features a built-in shield and is fairly durable, with the ability to crush humans without much resistance. To create the tunneler, he elects to scan Shiro's brain, as Shiro is one of their most skilled miners. Connecting his brain to these larger mechanoids does require more bandwidth than the simple Militars, however, so the commander requests that Terciel weave the signal chip they pulled off the dead Diabolus into a mech commander helmet to increase his bandwidth. With everything else going on, the squad hadn't realised that they were slowly draining the settlement's batteries, as its power grid struggled to keep up with demand. Given the ridiculous output of the geothermal generator, and the fact that there was another geyser already inside the walls of the settlement, Brom suggested simply building another, which would more than meet their needs. As is to be expected, given all the practice he'd had, Terciel managed to create an excellent mech commander helmet, allowing the commander to expand his abilities, whilst also looking quite badass. With the settlement now set to be a permanent fixture of the rebellion and their primary spaceport for the foreseeable future, the commander proclaimed that it would be known as Freedom's Hold, the spot from which the rebellion would prove that they could hold out against the Empire's tyranny. The squad's attempts to build bridges with the locals was paying dividends, as the Orange Dominion faction got in touch to offer them a trade. They wished the squad to take care of a toxic spear machine, which is being guarded by just 2 mechanoids, and are willing to offer a prestige Chitin-fract helmet in exchange. Eager to continue outfitting their people in strong armour, the commander agrees. The younger generation are eager to prove themselves as the successors to the rebellion, so Vin and Sammy offer to venture out and handle the toxic spear on behalf of the squad. The commander was happy to see the younger folk playing an active role, but also wanted to make sure there was someone else there to help them. Since Jay was wandering around the settlement for the time being, waiting for them to produce more materials, he asked Jay to accompany them, and suggested that they use the shuttle to make the journey quicker. It would be a lot faster than the truck, and although he didn't mention this part to them, it would make it quicker and easier to get anyone back to the settlement for treatment if they sustained injuries. Arriving at the location, the group find 2 Scythers guarding the spear. As Scythers are melee mechanoids, the group decide to kite them back towards the shuttle, blasting at them along the way with their guns. Unfortunately, the Scythers are quite sturdy, and the group fail to take either of them down before their backs are against the shuttle. They hop in the shuttle and take a very short trip to the other side of the local area, giving Vin a chance to tend to the injury that Jay sustained, while Sammy lays down covering fire. Although the first Scyther gets dangerously close to them, they decide to stick out and manage to take it down at the last second, although their strategy costs Sammy a quick slice across the hand. The second Scyther is less effective and gets down before getting close. With the danger gone, they tend to Samine, and then venture over to the structure to destroy the spewer, achieving their mission objective with only minor resistance. After a few days of the squad making some progress with their tasks, a number of them are unfortunately struck down with fibrous mechanites. The presence of these mechanites in their bodies will cause them a lot of pain, but there's no treatment beyond letting their bodies fight the infection. Until then, the best they can do is treat the pain with medicine, so to that end, they extend their heal root patch. They do currently have a nice little stockpile, but that'll disappear fast with the regular treatments that will be required. After another few days of peace and quiet, the squad have managed to attain enough resources to allow Jay to finish up the shield generator in the butt of the Arctis Minor. It wasn't exactly prepared for combat, but it did technically now have shields, a gun, and some minor heat capacity, so it could protect itself from basic attacks. The heat capacity was vital, as any incoming attacks that hit the shield would generate heat, and if the heat capacity was reached, the shield would break, allowing any further attacks to directly damage the Arctis Minor. As Jay is putting the final touches on the Arctis Minor's new laser turret, the squad receive the news that their prisoner, Snap, has decided to join them in their endeavours. As an ex-quarry worker, Snap is immediately assigned to helping with the never-ending drill work that needs to be done around Freedom's Hold. With the next batch of resources, Jay adds a couple of railguns to the ship. Railguns have a very high range, allowing them to hit any attackers at a distance. The size of the ship now meant that the two small engines it had would be unlikely to allow it to control the distance between itself and any attackers, so until they could upgrade the ship's engines, it'd be important they could hit things at any distance. Another group of raiders soon approach the base, but they are poorly equipped, so the attack merely serves as a chance for the pikemen to get its first taste of blood. Hell, the only real damage is some of the trenches collapsing in on themselves, and that's the result of Snap deciding that our weapon of choice would be the grenade launcher the previous raiders had dropped. Deciding that fighting the Diabolus was worth it to upgrade his mechanator equipment, Gardner instructs the crew to start building an antenna so that he can taunt a mechanoid war queen into attacking them. If they can dismantle one, they could learn more about how to create different mechanoids for their own army. The war queen didn't take kindly to the threat, and arrived very rapidly, bringing 5 pikemen and 2 scythers with her. As a war queen, she would also be able to summon hundreds of smaller mechanoids to attack the squad until they managed to take her out. The mechs start their assault by throwing some of their expendable units in to draw fire. The pikemen pose a challenge, as they can stand outside of the defences and still hit the squad with their long-range weapons, whilst only a few of the squad have long enough range weapons to hit them. The few that do focus on the pikemen, while the rest try to take down the scythers before they can engage the squad in melee. With their attentions split, the squad struggle to bring down the approaching scythers. One gets close enough to rip one of the spotlights to shreds, and moves on to the turret behind it, as the commander blasts it with his chain shotgun. The turret also gets shredded, but before it can move on to the commander, he finally manages to bring it down. Having already taken a number of shots, Snap has retreated to the nearby mech lab to tend to her wounds. The kids are hiding in there too, but their medical knowledge isn't good enough to actually help her out. The commander sends his new tunneler out into the centre of the defences to try and tank some of the hits from the pikemen, whilst he and the other squad members with short-range weapons travel around the side of the settlement to the postern gate, looking to sally forth and get close enough to use their short-range weapons on the mechanoids. Frustratingly, as soon as they get out there, Terciel goes berserk and decides to start beating the commander. So, in a family effort, Samine and Gardner beat Terciel to the ground, whilst Tavi distracts the mechanoids, by getting himself knocked down immediately. With half of the team down, the commander decides to let the tunneler and the single Minotaur he's managed to resurrect finish the job on the War Queen, while he retreats back to the hospital. After a bit more time, and a few more mental breakdowns, they finally take out the War Queen. It's cost them a fair few injuries though, as the hospital now overflows with both patients and blood. It might take a while for the squad to recover from this one. With so many people injured or otherwise unable to help, the commander radios Jay and asks him to return to the settlement just to help tend the injured and keep things running until the squad are back on their feet. While down on the ground, Jay notices how much steel the squad have managed to extract, and decides that instead of waiting for more advanced components to build out the ship, he could start by cladding it in some reinforced steel hull armour. In an ideal situation, attackers would never get through the shield, but it usually helps to plan for less than ideal situations, and if shots started getting through to the hull, some armour plating could reduce the chances of vital systems being damaged or destroyed. With the plating also adding a little extra visual flair to the ship, and Jay already having an abundance of food from his 3 artificial ecosystems, he elects to switch one to grow Tinctoria, which he can use to paint the outside of the ship, to give her a little more life. A few days later, a very dangerous event occurs, as toxic waste suddenly begins to fall from the sky onto Freedom's hold. The crew have experienced this occurrence before on other planets, and immediately jump into action, starting by building a barn in the animal pen, where the animals can shelter under a roof and avoid the worst of the fallout. Their crops stand no chance of survival, so they quickly harvest what they can, and then the commander puts a moratorium on sowing any more crops or working outside at the deep drills until the fallout settles. To enable them to have some kind of life, and maybe even some minor productivity without subjecting themselves to the falling toxic waste, the group create a large covered walkway connecting most of the buildings in Freedom's hold, allowing for some time spent outside without any risk. While life on the surface slows down due to the fallout, life on the Arctis Minor is about to get interesting. The chameleon device cannot be run indefinitely, as it builds up a lot of heat that occasionally needs to be vented, and, during one such venting event, a hostile pirate ship detects the Arctis Minor and moves in to try and destroy it so that they can scavenge their remains. But the Arctis Minor now has a few weapons to go with its shields, and Jay isn't about to let it go down without a fight. The pirate ship is small and without shields. Jay knows from the commander that if he can take out the control console, it will lose all utility and eventually fall out of orbit and burn up upon re-entry. With the shields raised, Jay trains his long-range rail cannons on the section of the pirate ship that he thinks is most likely to hold the control console, and begins firing. The first volley has little impact, only weakening the armoured tip around the front of the pirate ship. But as the pirates draw ever closer, the plasma cannon and the laser cannon on the Arctis Minor are then both in range, and they manage to pierce a hole in the ship's hull. Unfortunately, the pirate ship's lasers cause a lot of heat to build up in the Arctis Minor's shields, bringing them close to collapse. Jay lands a few more ineffective shots, but through the tiny gap in the hull he can detect the control console. Now he just needs to thread a shot through that gap and he can finish out the fight. Using the laser turret, he manages to drill straight through to the control console, knocking the life out of the enemy ship. And not a moment too soon, as they've just managed to overwhelm the Arctis Minor's shields, with the heat build-up causing the shield generator to catch on fire. With the danger over for now, Jay managed to put out the fire and assess the damage. Thankfully only the final blast from their laser turrets had actually hit the hull, and sure enough the steel plating had helped protect the Arctis Minor from any real damage. After letting his nerves settle a little, Jay scanned the enemy ship. If he could dismantle it, it would yield an abundance of all the materials he would need to expand the Arctis Minor. Sadly, he had no salvage bay on board the Arctis Minor, so to do this he would need to take a shuttle over to the pirate ship, construct a new control console on board it, and limp the damaged husk back to the Arctis Minor. Unfortunately, although the ship was done for, the pirates that had been aboard it were very much still alive, albeit floating aimlessly in space. Jay couldn't contend with 3 pirates on his own, especially ones with such advanced weaponry. It was a little wasteful, but all he could do now was watch, and wait for the planet's gravity to drag what remained of the pirate ship down to the surface. Having experienced his first real taste of combat due to the inconsistent nature of the chameleon drive, Jay decided it was time to ensure that the Arctis Minor was ready for any eventuality, as the chameleon drive clearly couldn't be trusted to protect her any longer. With this in mind, he began working on more weapons and more heat capacity for the ship immediately. The next day, the Arctis Minor begins to float into another field of objects, although this time it's a field of debris, probably from some other poor pirate ship that got destroyed out here in the void. This debris field proves a lot more dangerous than the small asteroid fields the ship has encountered so far, and causes a fair bit of damage for Jay to clean up. In stark contrast, things on the ground are looking up as the worst of the toxic fallout begins to settle. With things going smoother in Freedom's Hold, the group decide to use some of the marble bricks that the kids have been cutting in their downtime to start reducing the flammability of the settlement. The abundance of wood when they landed made it the perfect construction material, but now that they were better settled and the fact that mortar strikes from attackers were more common, it made sense for them to replace the wooden walls with walls of stone, which would be less susceptible to fire. They began this process with the stockroom, as it was where most of their valuables were. It seems that Vin and Shiro managed to find a chance to sneak away while they thought no one was looking, and hook up in one of the rooms of the settlement. Unfortunately for them, it seems that Brom's new helmet made her quite oblivious to her surroundings, as she just saunters into the room, interrupting their fun. It's not long before Tercio has finished the squad's first full set of handcrafted marine armour, which is handed to Samini. As the squad's next generation and skilled combatants, Samini and Vin are to receive the next sets of high-tech armour. The older members have already suffered a lot of injuries, making them less effective in combat already. If they can get the new generation properly armoured, the old generation may be able to pass off defensive duties to them, without burdening them with the abundance of injuries that the older crew had to endure. After the success of the last mission they did for the Orange Dominion, they get in touch with the rebels once more to ask them for help again. This time they offer some chitin fract armour, which they can use to fully armour another squad member. It's possible they should have looked at the specifics more closely, but the commander is just really excited to get the armour, so he happily agrees. To help them defend against the 3 groups of attackers that are coming, the Orange Dominion sends 8 soldiers to Freedom's Hold to help them defend. The first group of attackers follow not far behind, and they look to be trying to set up a position with which to lay siege to Freedom's Hold. With the Orange Dominion callously specifying that they don't care about what happens to the soldiers they sent, the commander decides to send them out to deal with the siegers. He does care about his people, so if he can avoid risking them, then it seems like the most sensible plan. Although the soldiers are well armed and equipped with shields, it does not go great for them. There are a lot of raiders in the siege camp, and over the course of a few short hours, they manage to take out all of the lone soldiers. On the plus side, the mission is essentially effective, as instead of shelling the settlement, the raiders decide to kidnap the downed soldiers and leave. Just as they're leaving, however, another group of raiders appears to the south, similarly looking to lay siege to the hold. In an effort to draw the raiders out of their position, the commander sends the pikemen to take potshots at them, with a small contingent of Militors for close-range support. If the pikemen can dish out enough damage, they can force them into charging the defences where the squad would have a massive advantage. As it's taking a while, however, Vin grabs her sniper and heads out to help the pikemen with its long-range shots. The attackers really are hitting from all angles though, as on board the ship, the sensors begin to warn Jay of an approaching ship that's locking onto the Arctis Minor. As this occurs, yet another group of raiders drop pod into the centre of Freedom's Hold. With the commander and Vin still focused on the siege encampment to the south, the rest of the squad take up positions in the centre of the settlement, hoping to lure the new group of attackers into the range of the turrets to help defend them. An imped raider drops directly into the stockpile and spits fire across the whole thing. So much for protecting the stockpile from fire. Thankfully, between the turrets, the squad's gunfire, and the fact that the imped set fire to the room with themselves and a few of their allies inside it, the drop pod group soon attempt to flee. Back in space, the sensors reveal that the attacking ship has torpedoes, which outrange even the railguns of the Arctis Minor. With no weapons in range and no ability to close the distance, the Arctis Minor has to simply endure the hail of torpedoes. The laser turret on board can be turned into a point defense turret, allowing it to shoot some of the torpedoes before they hit the shields, but it's only one turret and it can't intercept them all. The Arctis Minor's shields soon fail in a burst of flames. But thankfully it seems that the attackers have also run out of torpedoes, and they attempt to get closer to utilise their uranium slug turret. but this turns out to be a massive mistake. Moving closer allows the Arctis Minor to start unleashing hell upon the attacking ship, overheating their shields immediately. Back on the ground, Vin and the mechanoids have finally managed to goad the siege encampment into charging them. Back in orbit, the Arctis Minor has taken a lot of damage, but it manages to launch a final volley at the attacking ship, destroying its control console and ending the fight. Unfortunately, some of the last shots from the uranium slug turret were still travelling through space before the ship was destroyed, and they managed to thread their way into the bridge of the Arctis Minor, destroying its control console too, and sending it careening back towards the surface of the planet, with Jay on board. Back on solid ground, the squad make an attempt to save the stockpile, but it's simply too far gone, and with the next group approaching, they have to leave it to burn and return to the defences. On the Arctis Minor, Jay uses all of his knowledge and experience of his time aboard to scavenge enough materials from the destroyed sections of the ship to rebuild the control console, allowing him to guide the ship back into its stable orbit, saving it from complete destruction by the skin of his teeth. Back at the settlement, the defences do their job admirably, and the last of the attackers are soon routed, with almost no injuries to the squad, aside from poor Snap. However, with the garage, the stockpile, and the northern side of the settlement all ablaze, the work was far from done. Samony suffers burns trying to stop the fire from spreading from the stockpile to the wooden bedrooms adjoined to it, but manages to save them in the end. She then dashes to the garage, ignoring the pain, and hops into the truck to drive it out into the wilds to save it from joining the rest of the garage in the inferno. While she's doing this, the rest of the squad are trying to save the north side of the settlement, but it is a losing battle, and their entire freezer along with all of their food supplies are soon gone. In an effort to stop the fire spreading further, they make a final hold in the classroom. The fire has already superheated the air however, and most suffer horrible burns in the oven it's become. In the end however, they save most of the structure and stop the further spread. After 4 separate attacks in a single day, and an inferno of epic proportions destroying both their stockpile and food store, the squad are in a bad way. But they have survived. It may not be a great way to survive, but they're all alive, and they can rest and recover. Thanks to the burns, infections would be aplenty in the coming days, but everyone was pulling their weight to keep things moving. Even little Katsumi was bartering with traders to try and secure the resources they needed to keep everyone going, while Weaver was putting in time in the hospital, learning the art of medicine. Things were looking a little dire at this point, but dire was just the norm for the rebels, and they knew they'd bounce back stronger than ever. Hey guys, Tuna here. God, this one got a wee bit stressful towards the end, didn't it? I half thought we were about to lose everything, but we kind of didn't. Thank you for the suggestions for our settlement names on the last video, by the way. I sort of smooshed the ideas together to come up with Freedom's Hold, which felt quite fitting. Personally, I'm really looking forward to booting up Rimworld again very soon to record the next episode and find out where it goes from here, so hopefully you guys are too. Until then, I hope life is treating you well, and I shall catch you all for the next one soon. Bye bye!